Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Welcome back to Talos Talks Shit, episode 18. I'm your host, Massimo Meneghetti. My co-host, Pubby, is off in the land of paradise with his sweet something. So, I'm joined by my very good friend and co-founder of Immersive DSP, Mr. Sean Devonport.
Yeah.
What up, man?
What's up? Good to be back.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a while.
It has. It's been
Not
a very
really,
long
actually.
time. So last podcast we started talking about immersive audio and also more just about how audio developed in general and theatre surround sound and the surround sound systems you would get at somewhere like Game or Dion. And now we're going to dive into what it really means to be immersive.
Yeah.
Immersive reality, immersive experiences, immersive audio.
Yeah.
So, Sean, I don't know if you want to break down the different types of immersive environments we get.
Yeah, so I'm just quoting from this really excellent book called Patterns in Game Design, written by, I think, Staffan Björk and Jussi Holopainen. Sorry, I'm reading. And forgive me for pronouncing those names terribly. But yeah, they give a really good definition of these. So they break immersion down into four components. Sensory motoric immersion, which occurs when you have some sort of tactile feedback through your senses. So say you like tap a table, you're gonna hear some sort of sound. And that's sort of like sight, and that bleeds onto like sight and touch and smell as well. Or obviously I mentioned touch. Then you get a sort of spatial immersion, which is more of like your environment and being immersed in an environment. And I'm using the word immersed where I shouldn't be. It's actually it being completely, it's like you're taken away from your natural environments. So it's generally a simulated environment like a game. Then you get cognitive immersion, which is probably the most common form of immersion because everyone gets it when you're like typing an email or like getting really sucked into some work. That's being 100% cognitively immersed.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
these types of immersions don't necessarily relate to virtual environments.
No, the way that you want to create a virtual environment is understanding what it means to be immersed in your physical and actual environment.
Okay.
It's the best way to create that. The final one obviously is emotional immersion, and you can be emotionally immersed by anything. Like, you know, if your dog died, or if you had listened to a beautiful piece of music and anything like that. So that's another way to be immersed.
Okay, so there's different types of immersion, right?
Yeah.
So that obviously means, as you say, if we want to create immersive environments and immersive audio, we need to understand what immersion means.
Yes.
And how to replicate that for the end user.
Yes, exactly. That's the trick.
So that's the trick. So let's get into immersive DSP and what you guys actually do, what your technology is, and how it works.
Yeah, so Immersive DSP is essentially a company of 3 people at this point. And we're very passionate about immersive audio. And leading on from what we were talking about, it's a way to create audio that completely transports you from your actual environment. So there are various different projects that we've worked on and that I've worked on, particularly at the National Arts Festival in Grahamstown, after being there for so many years. But some of the cooler installations are the ones that they are built out of completely different sort of fabrics, which kind of ticks the box of sensory motoric immersion. You walk into this different place and you're no longer touching things that you're used to touching. Then we have this sort of the audio immersion that goes with the touch. So if there wasn't a good audio system or something that could spatialize sounds or create this sense of like interactive sounds, you'd have this break in immersion. So people will no longer feel like they're inside this virtual space that has been actually made with material.
So now, when you say spatialized sounds,
Yes,
what
thanks.
exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so leading back from what we were speaking about in the first episode, we're using things like object-based audio and the algorithms that go with them to move sounds around a space and bring them to someone that's, say, by close to a certain edge of the installation. So the idea of that is that people that are in the installation can interact with those sounds and hear themselves differently, maybe if the sounds are being recorded or played back to them, and doing those sorts of things to have them engage with the art piece, not just actually see it and be surrounded by it.
Okay, still, so to get back to audio spatialization.
Oh, sorry,
'cause
I
that's
went on a
really what you guys.
tangent.
No, that's all good, man. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, thank you.
Talos.
Yeah.
You talk the
Holding
shit,
it
I'm
down.
Talos.
So yeah, it's something.
Spatialization is what your company does.
Yes,
So just to be straightforward about it, you guys specialize
audio spatialization.
in audio spatialization. So you have proprietary technology that you have been developing since your honors level,
Yes, yeah.
and that technology is a way of taking sounds and moving them around an environment that makes the listener feel like they are in a real environment.
Yes.
Because when you at a movie or something, it sounds, or you have a 7.1 system at home, it all sounds very cool, but it doesn't necessarily sound like reality. Because in reality, your ears are very highly tuned objects to keep you alive. So you can hear sounds from above, from the back, a little bit like above and to the left, a little bit low and to the right. It's not necessarily just these 7 individual sources that you're working
Yes,
with.
yeah.
So basically what you guys are trying to do is you guys are trying to create that realism of sound in space.
Yeah.
Exactly. Spatialization. And you are doing that with the Emergo system,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
our flagship software and hardware solution. And essentially what it does is it makes it very easy for users to create spatial audio. That's been our goal from the very beginning, is have a system that makes it extremely easy to set up a multitude of speakers, have all the speakers' location encoded for you, and have a little app maybe on your phone that allows you to just integrate with the system without having to understand too much about the inners of, audio networking and all these sort of things that make it happen.
Well, speaking about make it happen, we know kind of how it works. Basically, it moves audio around in space so that it tricks your brain into thinking that there's a snake creeping up the rock behind you. But why does it work?
So it works mostly through the psychophysics of hearing. That's what we call it. There's a great book on that if you ever want to read it, John's Blauert, called The Psychophysics of Spatial Hearing. But they essentially came up with a whole bunch of parameters that you can play with that allows for sounds to be spatialized. So something that we spoke about earlier was stereophonic systems and how those work. So we are allowed to offset certain sound images or objects using level delays between loudspeakers. Those are one of the parameters that we use in our system to do that. But we base it off object-based audio. And then there's also the others of time delays between speakers. So if you actually delay 2 loudspeakers and they're equally distant to your ears, you can get the sense of like an offset of the image. Too much of that causes a Haas effect, where it feels like there's a Doppler.
The Haas effect.
Yes, yeah. So obviously the Haas effect is the doubling of an image as you delay one sound from the other sound. So in nature, if you have someone talking from the left and another person talking from the right, your brain would hear the sound coming sooner, like the wavefront of that talker coming to your left ear of the left talker sooner than the right ear to the left talker. I mean, the right talker to the left ear.
Right. So basically, your your ears can perceive distance in sound as well.
Yes, so they perceive distance through level attenuation generally and frequency transformations. And that's the one parameter that I still need to get to. But the main parameters we use in the Emergo system that we found provides the best, most efficient results level and time delay differences between speakers.
So just to sum that all up, that basically means you guys are tricking the ears by tricking levels and times to make the brain think that certain things are coming from certain places.
Yes, exactly.
And
we
to sort of, yeah?
And we try to make that really easily interfaced with any sort of production software that you use. So the idea is that you don't have to be using a certain type of audio software or audio hardware. We make that as sort of agnostic as possible.
Good word.
Although
I like that word.
Do you need to use, yeah.
What do you need to use? Sorry.
You need to use our speakers at this point. But I think these speakers have a lot of benefits because they're very simple to use and set up. They fit in various little odd places. And you don't need to run like a 42 channel snake to your loudspeaker rig to get the spatialization happening.
So
as well as that, it's also very processor efficient because at a loudspeaker, you're adding processing power to the system. So it's not all running on your host computer.
So basically that means less cables, less cost,
Yep.
and ease of setup.
Yes.
And another important thing about these speakers... Scalability, and these speakers are fairly cheap.
Yes.
In terms of cutting-edge technology, the system comes in at a fairly reasonable price. You can contact Immersive DSP if you are interested in the next level of audio.
Yeah. Please do.
But that was kind of part of your philosophy, eh? Try to make it as cheap and as accessible as possible.
Definitely. Always.
Okay, so I'm quite interested in the foundations.
Yeah.
Because to figure out how the brain picked up audio, they use these really cool things. It's basically a human head with ears. But the ears are very advanced, very sensitive microphones, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And then they would set these up in a room with tons and tons, like covered in tiny speakers so that they could get very accurate point sources of audio directed at the ears.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically used these ear microphones. And it's very important that these ears were anatomically correct, because the way your ear is shaped is very important in the way it picks up sound.
Definitely.
And
mostly with frequency absorption, I think.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, how did they sort of figure this out, man? I mean, like...
So I'm not 100% sure. I think the earlier researchers thought, okay, the best way that we can start to model how our ears perceive directional sound is to just create a human model and measure the sounds from each ears. And I think that led on to a whole bunch of other very interesting concepts, but that essentially how it started. And it's called a very specific term. It's called binaural recording. And what it essentially does is you have your left and right microphones at a human model's ears, and you're able to record the sounds from any sort of direction. So what they do is they play an impulse response that captures the whole frequency content of what we can perceive. So it goes whoop, and it does that from millions of, I'm not going to say millions, but thousands of directions. And then what they do is they capture each of those whoops until they have this thing called the filter bank. I'm not going to go into the technicals of that, but essentially what we're able to do now is we have an accurate model of how the brain perceives sound. So how the ear actually filters a certain sound or transforms a certain sound to make it sound like it's coming from the left or the right, or above and below.
That's very interesting.
Or behind you.
Yeah, that's or behind you.
Everywhere.
That's very interesting because when Sean says whoop, what that means for people who don't know the Fletcher-Munson curve,
yes, yeah,
is that you perceive sound differently. So very low end sounds, bassy stuff, yeah, your subwoofer, you perceive that you hear that at a lower volume than you hear things like talking.
Yeah.
And this is just...
Or a baby crying.
Or specifically a baby crying. In fact, the frequency that a baby cries at is the most audible frequency for the human ear.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And
the audio banana.
Just as an aside, what's that?
They got a graph of that. It's called the audio banana because it looks like a banana. The points at which your ears are most sensitive in terms of a frequency.
Yeah. So basically, kind of around the frequency of human talking is where your ears are most sensitive. If you're hearing things that are much higher frequency, for example, soaring eagle coming down to snatch your child.
Cicadas.
What's that?
Cicadas. Insects.
Oh, those bugs. Yeah.
Insects are very high frequency.
Yeah. Those. We have these ringing bugs in South Africa that just sort of sound like.
I'll play a recording for you.
Oh, great! We've got recordings of that. So, can you hook that up?
Yeah, let me see if I can get that going. Okay.
Okay, if you guys have headphones, I would suggest putting them on now, and you can hear some of the immersive capabilities we are able to do. Please play it, Mr. Selector. So, as you can hear, the insects, the cricket, and the owl are all sort of very screechy. That's what we call high frequencies.
Yes.
Those screechy things.
Click, 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 click.
Yeah. And we definitely hear those softer than we would hear something like the human voice, because it would be pretty impossible to live in the jungle where we lived most of the time if those noises were as loud as human speaking. You'd probably go crazy. So
the really interesting thing though is when I recorded this, I had a look at the frequency response of the recording, and I expected that the sound of the insects would be located at the very high end frequency and then it'd sort of start to drop off. What I found really interesting though is that the actual sounds of the bugs kept on going higher, and it was like the amplitude just kept on increasing past the spectrum, the limit of the spectrum analyzer, which I thought was quite interesting because it almost implies that the way that insects hear is actually at like a higher amplitude.
Supersonic hearing, literally.
Something like that, yeah. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's something that I thought about, and I was like, wow, that's actually really amazing.
Look, there's tons of audio that exists in the world that we just don't hear.
Yes.
There's audio that, for a dog, for example, has a much higher frequency range capability than a human. So that dog would probably be able to hear that insect when it goes beyond your tools for measurement of where that insect sits in the frequency spectrum. So to bring this all back to immersive audio, what you're doing, is you're using all of these sort of natural things that exist inherently in the way we hear and perceive the world, and you're using those to trick the brain into hearing things in various places.
Yes.
And that is all dispersed on your immersive sound system.
Renderings, exactly.
Exactly. And the technology you have been developing is the technology to make those renders work correctly.
Yes.
Without getting too technical, it has to be encoded and then decoded, right?
Yes. So we use this concept, and it was developed in the 70s, but it's called ambisonics. And the idea is that you have the plain idea was that there was this guy called Michael Gerzon who really loved recording music, and he was super far out physics type of guy. And he came up with this concept of, okay, if we have mic capsules that can collect sound from a very particular direction, why don't we create an array of microphones and have them placed in a 360 sound field, or I won't say sound field because that's the terminology they use, but different directions essentially. So instead of using those binaural recordings where you just have your ears picking up sound, he thought, why don't we just have coincident arrays, which is essentially saying very close microphones that capture various directions of sound. And essentially that is what we call the ambisonics encoded B format.
Okay, so basically Right now, we are both sitting in front of one microphone.
Yes, yeah.
That one microphone is created to capture our voice from one direction. If I go around the microphone, it starts to sound pretty shitty.
Yeah.
But if I come back in front of it, I am nice and clear. So instead of trying to just trick the ears, the Ambisonics format started to record things in a more immersive space.
Yes.
So lots of mics around things, basically. Here left, you hear right, you hear center, you hear back.
The key component to this is that you have to decode that format, because there's no way that you can put those. I mean, the way would be to set up loudspeakers at each of those directions.
Exactly.
That
They would have to be pretty exact to where you put the microphones, right?
Yeah, so you set those loudspeakers up and then you can hear them. So, and that was a big limitation at that stage, to put it bluntly. But now, with all these other ideas of object-based audio, we've developed algorithms that allow you to play back these ideal loudspeaker configurations on any loudspeaker configuration. There are also these things that we spoke about, the binaural recording impulse responses, or those filter banks that I spoke about, that allow you to play back those loudspeaker positions through headphones using the filter bank.
That's really interesting. So you guys are basically taking a lot of interesting research and technology, and you are refining it into a usable system.
Yes.
That will hopefully one day be capable, well, probably is already capable, of creating very convincing immersive audio environments.
Definitely. That's the goal.
Yeah. And those interesting immersive audio environments and the benefits and potential that they have for humans and medicine and entertainment
Research.
is going to be the focus. Research is going to be the is going to be the focus of our next podcast.
Can I play them off on a ambisonic recording?
Yeah, that would be great. Please play us out. Again, please put your headphones on. Please make sure that they're the right way around. Look at them. There's a little left-right indicator. It makes a big difference for the optimal sounds.
For the optimal sound, but it still works on a stereo rig.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, enjoy some immersive audio recordings of
Hong Kong.
Amazing. Cheers and thank you guys, and we hope you tune into episode 19 to really get stuck into the applications of this technology. Dope, man.
Yeah, I think so, dude. No, I was sick.